So we had discussed about that, what are the methods of, if you remember, we had discussed that how the things are coming for the research. We are discussing what is the concept, what is the definitions. We had discussed in the last class. Today we are going to discuss about the hypothesis and propositions. In the last class, we are discussing about the what is the difference between hypothesis and the proposition. So here is proposition, hypothesis, and theory. There are three things. So a statement about a phenomena that may be verified as true or false is proposition. And a proposition formulated for the empirical testing is called as hypothesis. In another way, it is a solution of the any research problem is called as hypothesis. So there are two types of hypothesis: descriptive hypothesis, that, as for example, Indian cities are facing solid waste disposal problem. Relational hypothesis, as for example, an increase in the family income. Fourth, leads to an increase in the percentage of income saved, DV. So now theory, how hypothesis leads towards a conclusion or a theory, which is a set of interrelated concepts, definitions, and propositions that are advanced to explain the predict phenomena. So this is our so now we are coming to our hypothesis main subject, that how a research scholar is moving towards from the variables, propositions, and then hypothesis. So there are two types of hypothesis. We have seen hypothesis, theory formulations, observations or experiment, data collections, hypothesis testing, interpretations and validation, and lastly, accept till better one is found. We have seen that there are objectives, four or five, for any research, for which a research scholar is going to be registered, and for objectives, there is a hypothesis, and how it is being tested till the end of the conclusion of the thesis or the research paper. So this is the stage how a research scholar moves towards for the testing of our hypothesis. So let us discuss what is called as a hypothesis. In a simple manner, we say that solution of the any research problem is called as hypothesis. But here a statement about the generally held view called thesis. It should reflect some tentativeness worth verifying. It needs to be tested by various means. At the last, whether this hypothesis is validated with our objectives, what were the research problems through which the objectives are being fulfilled or not. It can help generalization in some instances. Its construction is closely related to the objective and the operational part of the research study. So at every chapter, which is nothing but they are the fulfillment of the objectives of the research. You have to see that whether the hypothesis is being verified or not, or tested or not, or validated or not. Again, what are the characteristics of hypothesis? It must be conceptually clear, stated in terms that can be measured, whether in the analytical method or quantitative method. It should have empirical reference also, not based on moral judgment or mere suggestions. It must be specific, pinpointed also. All operations and predictions must be spelled out. The scope of its application should be very much clear. Again, it should be related to the available knowledge and techniques. It should be expressed economically using correct terminology. It should be related to a body of theory. There should be some rationale for its formulations. How the it can be formulated, we'll discuss in our next slides also. So hypothesis again, there it is tentative in nature. If it is not fulfilling the objectives of the research, if the objectives are not being tested, then the hypothesis can be changed also. That is why it is tentative. It can be changed. Better not in a question form. Hypothesis must be in a not in a question form, but in a statement form. It must be precise and specific about variables. We have discussed that what are the variables in the beginning. Confined to one issue alone, unidimensional, either in a non-directional or directional form. As for example, training makes a difference or training makes a positive difference in production output. This is the hypothesis that it may be directional or non-directional. Again, sources, personal experience, even dream, cultural values, intuitions, folk wisdom, past records, observations, discussions with other. And it all depends for relating of the hypothesis. It comes as we go through the literature of our research related with our topic. So that is why it is it is said that as many as you go through the original sources and the primary sources on which the subject which you have chosen for your research, you go through, you can observe their outcomes, conclusions also. What are the observations of the previous scholars? How they have been discussed? How the research questions which have been arising on those research papers or the research thesis by the scholars? Then, on the basis of observations and discussions with your seniors and supervisors, you can make an hypothesis. So, what is the role of the hypothesis? Why there is a need of hypothesis? It provides the directions to the study. Until unless you do not have any present solution in your mind of the research problem, you cannot move towards for the collecting of your data or the research materials. So at least you must have that. If I have some questions related with my research topic, there must be some answers to those questions also. And based upon that, or in that directions, you are moving towards for collecting your research papers or research books. It identifies facts for the study. So you are limited since you have the solutions in your mind. So you are going to find out the relevant facts related with your research topic. Hypothesis guides research design process. we have already discussed that how there are 7 steps of the research from the literature review till the end of the submission of your thesis. So it's gives help in designing the research process, as well as it also facilitates interpretations of the results. As for example, one example is being given here that research output is low when researchers, guides, and library differ in their perceptions about the stock building. Now, who shall be studied? Researcher, guides, and librarians. What context library stock? What shall be studied? Their individual perceptions. How shall be studied? By questionnaire and interview. So here hypothesis formulation is not mandatory for every kind of research. However, sometimes the research papers are required to make the hypothesis, but sometimes if you are making any research paper, there is sometimes there is no mandatory, no compulsory for that also. Now let us discuss what are the types of the hypothesis. There are mainly 2 types of hypothesis: general hypothesis, where there is the expectations, association, and difference are tested. As for example, smoking is the root cause of several types of cancer. This is a general hypothesis. Then a specific hypothesis that it is being tested for particular trend in the collecting data. As for example, jaundice currently prevailing in this town is due to contaminated water supply. This is the hypothesis solution of any research problem related with the already prevailing our materials. So here, jaundice currently prevailing in the town is due to contaminated water supply. This is the specific type. Again, type of the hypothesis that a hypothesis is a proposition formulated for the empirical testing. It is of 2 types. Descriptive type, that is it states the existence, size, form, or distribution of some variable. As for example, Indian academic libraries are facing journal subscription problem. Academic libraries spend less than 20% of the budget now on book purchase. Or in question form, are Indian academic libraries facing journal subscription problem? Are academic libraries spending low percentage of their budget on book purchase now? So generally, descriptive form is preferred over question form. So generally, the hypothesis should not be made in the question form. So in the descriptive form, hypothesis is being made. So there is a descriptive hypothesis. It must be in. The second hypothesis is relational hypothesis, which describes a relationship between 2 variables with respect to some case. If it represents cause and effect relationship, then it is called as explanatory or causal hypothesis. As for example, research work causes use of e-resources. If only association is implied, then it is called as correlational hypothesis. For example, falling rates of library user and falling rates of original thinking are caused by internet. Here, falling library use and original thinking are related, but neither causes the other. So this is the relational. We are also already seen law of dependent originations also discusses about that everything comes into existence dependent on some cause and conditions. There is no self-independent entity. Nature is dependent on environment. Environment is also dependent on man. So all these are relational, you can say. Whenever there is a sense of cause and effect, this is called as and the hypotheses which are generally based upon the cause and effect. This is called as relational hypothesis. So one is based upon that. So as for example, we have seen that research work causes use of U resources. So when the research scholars are mainly dependent on our e-subscriptions of the journal, e-books or PDF of the books, then there is no need of purchasing new books or the journals. That is why there is a less purchase of the books in the libraries nowadays. So this is the core rational. So there is the cause because internet people are using. That is why there is the less purchase of the books in the library. Again, hypothesis guidance. There are three things: prediction, comparison, and association. Predictions facilitates prediction about the future value of measurement. Comparison, it brings about the impact of different variables. It changes it. We have seen already that how the concepts are changing. Association, it measures how change in one variable influences the other variable. Now, there is a non-directional hypothesis. We have seen there are two types of hypothesis, directional and non-directional hypothesis. That is the null hypothesis. Training has no impact on the productivity of the library staff. This is the first. Second, alternative hypothesis. That is the training has an impact on the productivity of the library staff. So this is there are two types of null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Then directional hypothesis, which is meant for testing the change. There are two types here. Null hypothesis, training has no impact on the productivity of the library staff. Alternative hypothesis, that training has a positive impact on the productivity of the library staff, or training has a negative impact of the productivity of the library staff. Now, what is the good hypothesis? The present problem of your research, present solution of your research problem. So good hypothesis, it is useful in organizing the research efforts. It limits the inquiry to the interactions of the certain variables. It guides the data collections and analysis process. It provides a clear indication of the extent of knowledge gained. Again, the feature of the good hypothesis, logical conclusion of a logical argument. Buddha also says that everything must be investigated with logic and reasoning. So here also good hypothesis or good research has a good logic also. So as for example, premise one, academic success is highly valued and respected in society, at least by parents and the teachers. Second, being valued and respected by others contribute to high esteem. Then hypothesis is higher level of academic success will be related to higher level of self-esteem. So this is the hypothesis related with the two types of our premise, that is the logical things. So see how the hypothesis is being made. Again, how it is tested. Measurement of variables is possible. For example, hypothesis, people tend to forget their email, account, passwords if not used for 1 month. This is one hypothesis. Then again, avoid what might happen if the heat from the sun increases gradually in the next 25 years. So this type of hypothesis is avoided. So it must be tested. People tend to forget their email accounts password if not used for 1 month. Again, features of the good hypothesis continuation में refutable or falsifiable by results of the process data. As for example, that overweight males are more prone to the heart attack. This is the general conception. It should be avoided. The more sins a person commits, the less likely he or she is to get to heaven. Again, positive about the existence of the something like relationship or the difference. These are the features. As for example, the new therapy technique does have an effect of depression. Avoid there is no relationship between age and memory ability. So it is not correct, this type of hypothesis that there is no relationship between age and memory ability. So next, what are the errors in hypothesis testing? Sometimes hypotheses are not come to the our concluding part of the thesis also. In decision making or in concluding part of our thesis, there are sometimes errors in the hypothesis also. So, like reality, null is false, null is true, correct decision, type 2 error. So, type 1 error, correct decisions. So, see how this is the for a social scientist, type 1 error, which occurs more is serious. It depends on the confidence level set statistically and its tightening is suggested. Rejecting a hypothesis means only the alternative hypothesis is to be retained. We have already discussed that when hypothesis is not coming to the objectives of the research, we have to change our hypothesis. It must come to the concluding part, what the solutions which were imagined in our mind for the research problem. If it does not come true, then we have to change the hypothesis also. Likelihood of type 2 error can be lowered by increasing the sample size also. Sometimes there are errors in the sampling method of the research. We have to change the sampling, the number of the sampling size of the method. Again, how this we are coming that when reject or do not reject the things, when we are confident are we that our decision is correct. This question can be answered by the specific level of the significance. It is denoted by a which of the probability of a type error. Typical value of A are 0.1, 0.05, and 0.01. For example, if A is equal to 0.1 for a test and the null hypothesis is rejected, then one will be 90% certain that this is the correct decision. So we can see how this hypothesis can be tested or validated. This is only through the anthropological or sociological studies when they are being tested, then this through this we can judge it. Once the level of significance is fixed, a critical value for suitable statistic like Z, or it is selected from the corresponding table. So, what is the deductive approach used for this hypothesis research? So, a research scholar tests or verifies a theory. Then again, a research scholar tests hypothesis or research questions from the theory, how the hypothesis being tested. Then researcher defines and operationalize variables derived from the theory. Again, researcher measures or observes variables using an instrument. So this is the how there is a deductive approach for the hypothesis. Again, research poses theory from the bottom. Researchers gather informations, interviews, observations. Then it leads towards the that a research scholar asks open-ended questions of the participants or records notes. Then research scholar analyzes data to form a hypothesis. Then he moves and looks for broad patterns, generalizations from hypothesis. And lastly, researcher poses theories also. Again, hypothesis, all people with physical overweight also have low self-esteem. How the deductive approach or inductive approach of the hypothesis is being undertaken. So in the case of deduction, predicted observation is if I find a person with overweight, I should also find he or she has low esteem. Then through the induction approach, the actual observation is I know three persons with overweight and all three have low self-esteem. So this is how deductive approach or inductive approach. Through example, we can understand it. So this is related with our hypothesis. Now we can move that how empirical research study can be formulated. So see, nowadays there is a age of internet or e-services. So through e-services we can do our or satisfy ourselves for our research also. So by employing e-services, firms can lower cost, open new revenue streams, and attract new customers. So user satisfaction by e-services must therefore be ensured. Second, that a study of the factors affecting user satisfaction is necessary to improve the e-services. Now, lastly, review of the literature suggests the theory of the region actions and technology accepted model be adopted with modifications for this study. So there are references for that also. So how this hypothesis can be built up and what are the characteristics of building the hypothesis? So user characteristics is demographic factors and previous experience could be important. In some individual computer proficiency affects user satisfaction rational. So here example user computer proficiency is associated with user satisfactions towards e-services. Again, perceived convenience. So how in the first case we have seen that in the case of building hypothesis, how the demographic factors and the previous experience could be important. Through the previous observations and the experiences, one hypothesis can be built up. Here perceived that response time and website functionality can affect the user satisfactions. As for that perceived convenience is positively associated with the user satisfactions towards e-services. Then website characteristics are correlated with perceived convenience. Now, perceived security. Security of the personal information is considered as very important by user in commerce. Irrational. Perceived security is correlated with user satisfactions towards e-services. Again, desire to use e-services regularly influences user satisfaction. Irrational. So user satisfaction is correlated with intentions to use e-services. So how this initial research is being made, if you see that how e-services are being undertaken by the research scholars. If you go through the H1, then here user computer and internet skill. Then H2, if you see, this is the related with the user satisfactions. Then there are perceived conveniences through the website features. Then again, there is a perceived security and there is a intentions to use it. So through this table, we can see that how initial research is being built up. So here there are some of the things related with user satisfactions, website features, perceived convenience, use intention, perceived security, and use skill and experiences. These are some of the features related with the user satisfaction, overall satisfaction, satisfactions with service, satisfactions with informations provided, website features, ease of use, usefulness, perceived convenience, transaction convenience, access convenience, use intention, intentions to use, intentions to purchase, intentions to use regularly, intentions to buy more. Perceive security that it is through the credit card, personal information, hardware security, software security, use skill and experience. It is a standard software use skill, knowledge of the internet use. So these are some of the things we can understand about it. Now we are coming to the conduct of the research, how research is being started or it can be begun. A survey questionnaire was used. Then a pilot study was carried out using 45 students. The questionnaire was examined by 10 experts. So, what are the testing of these questionnaires through the experts, through the lab, or through the if there are psychological tests or statistical data, we have to go through the instrument also. So total of 105,550 students located in public universities at two different places covered. Response rate 45.4704 responses. ANOVA indicated no significant difference between the characteristics, gender, age, and computer skill of the samples from two locations, and thus data obtained from them can be combined. Again, a 7-point Likert scale was used for making questionnaire items. The convergent and discriminant validity of the construct was established using principal component analysis with a Varimax rotations. So here validity and reliability A structural equation modeling technique, Literal 8.5, yielded a statistically valid path diagram. All the hypotheses were statistically confirmed. So this is the path of the researcher. We can see through the, it is only, you can say, quantitative method of the research, how the website perceived the security, user computer skill, how the satisfaction can be achieved by a researcher through the e-services. How interpretations is more important in our hypothesis. So moderately positive coefficient between the computer skills and user satisfaction shows that firms should revamp their website to facilitate all the users. High coefficient between perceived service convenience and satisfaction indicates that strategies to save search time on the website and minimizing confusion should get priority. Again, the users are concerned with security and thus advanced security must be installed on the website. Although the coefficient appears relatively small, it cannot be ignored. Positive coefficient between perceived convenience and website features is consistent with other studies. A strong user intention, as indicated by coefficient, implies promotion efforts to sustain it. So these are the limitations. Since the responded all students, the results could be generalized only for younger population. Further research is necessary to address these limitations to better understand e-services quality. Some of the lower value coefficient in the path diagram indicate further examinations of variable in the model. So this is the concluding part. User satisfaction towards e-services is definitely affected by the factors of perceived convenience, intentions to use, security, and user skills. The perceived convenience is influenced by the website features and attempts to make them serve both novice and skilled user be undertaken. Users should be periodically informed about upgraded e-services driven by web technology advances. After that, we generally put bibliography or references. So this is related with our e-services, what we have observed that how this is the going on. So this is building a good hypothesis and testing it provides a sort of finality to the research study. However, it is both art and science to master it. Every research a scholar has its own reasoning and logic to investigate the things. Everyone has its own style of writing or interpreting the things in a different manner. So the hypothesis is generally based upon the literature review, continuous literature review, and it varies from one person to another persons or from one research scholar to another researcher also. So this is the how a person makes good hypothesis and how it is being tested or validated. It depends of the intelligentsia or the how much he is making efforts for investigating the matter also. So this is the related with our hypothesis. If you have any question, you can ask for that. Any question if you have, you can ask.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Regarding the hypothesis, if we are conducting research on some kind of tradition about the dimension, adaptation, and transformation process, on that case, how can we assume the hypothesis? Is there mandatory or not?
No, hypothesis, one must have, being a student of our humanities and the arts and the social science. Every research scholar is supposed to make a hypothesis. Hypothesis leads a research scholar in the directions of collecting the research materials related with his research topic. So he has to make, it is not for this, it becomes compulsory for every research scholar for making the hypothesis. So generally, hypothesis is being tested at the end of the research or in the concluding part of your thesis also. So you have to test it. There are some of the things, and we have seen that how every person has its own intelligentsia, own intellect also. It has everyone has its own logic and reasoning to think about it, to make the solution of the research problem. And related with that, he collects the material and he interprets in his own way and writes in his own style also. Okay.
But the result is not the objectival. This is the subjective result. So that
Uh, Repeat again. Your sound is not coming very clear.
the research is not depend on the questionnaire base. It is textual base. So that
It is today we have given the example related with the questionnaire.
Mhm.
But if we have to test it, if it is related with the analytical or it is based upon the our literature, based upon the literature, we have to be another, you can say, hypothesis. So what we have discussed, it is only for the subjects which are related with the anthropological or sociological or psychological aspect of the research also. But there may be another things, so we'll discuss I will think over it, and then in the next class we can discuss about the how the hypothesis can be developed also in those fields also. Okay. Any more question?
Thank
So
you, sir.
okay, tomorrow we are so tomorrow again we are meeting together. We'll discuss some of the problems related with our research ethics also. So we'll discuss that how the concept of pluralism, how the matters which are being used, how we have to be very much cautious or aware from the very beginning of our research, from the literature view till the submission of our thesis, what are the ethics or the morals which a research scholar is supposed to be aware of that. So we'll discuss in our next class. So thank you very much and have a nice day. We'll meet tomorrow again at 8:30 sharp.
Thank you, Bimal.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much.
Bimal, in this.
Namaste.
Okay, okay. Namaskar, namaskar.